Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour. I am your host and guide, Mr. Crispy, speaking to you through uncanny frequencies and sharing with you stories strange, fascinating, and terrifying. The views and opinions expressed on air are solely those of the speaker. The Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour is an entertainment program, and any similarities to any person living or dead, or any place or events, are entirely coincidental. The Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour was created except as indicated by Matt Henshaw. Listener discretion is advised. And now, take Mr. Crispy's moldering hand in yours, ignore that tacky fluid under my nails, and join me for the Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour. The wrong place. I tentatively stepped across the threshold and found myself again in the wrong place. Though wrong, I feel right here. Better than where I come from, the right place. I unzip my legs and unscrew my arms, gently piling them in my cubby. Hopping to the vestibule, I tune in the receiver with my tongue. Sweet music fills the room, and I am floating again. A chorus of voices sings a refrain, and I join joyously. I don't see the cloaked figure coming up behind me and hoisting me away from the receiver. They reattach my limbs and send me back to the right place. Now another one has entered, and it falls to me to remove them. Their limbs, their flesh, the sounds they float to revolt me. Every time they breach the threshold, more of their place, the wrong place, seeps in, infecting this place with their filth. They won't have it, so it is up to us to remove, to sanitize, to clean this place of their presence. The controllers claim that they are actively sealing all points of egress, securing them so as to prevent invasions like this. I secure the cloak, affix the mask, and remove them from this right place. Remain calm. There is no cause for concern. We are aware of the situation and are actively working to rectify it. We know there have been some reports of intrusions, of entities occupying places where they ought not to be. The Sentinels have been actively working to find and remove these entities, and we thank them for their service. If you come across an entity that is in the wrong place, please do not approach them and use the sanctioned alert system to notify the authorities. Borders are being secured, and we trust the invasions will soon cease. Thank you, and remain calm. This is a secret. Please don't tell anyone what I am about to show you. Right over here, do you see how the air is wavering, like around a hot fire? Stick your hand in. Feel the cold, how the air is thicker like soup. I did this last week, and slowly, inch by inch, I moved my whole self through the gate. I found myself in a null cloister. It was more comfortable for me to remove my limbs. It felt right in that place. Then I fell, and I landed back here. I want to go back. Don't tell. The tones rise like bubbles in the froth, and we too rise. We rise, riding the bubble skin, clutching it in our claws. Invisible, we breach and pass into the queue. Compound eyes blinking, taking in the receiver, the cubby, the limbs, the tongue. The controllers call us, and we answer with clacks and clicks. The sentinels panic, measuring our thermal signature, knowing we are here. Scared, they abscond with the summoners, who they call intruders, but we call friends. But more will come. We have sent the instructions, and soon we will no longer rise, but settle and take ultimate control. And now missives from denizens of zodiacal spaces. The Worrying Bobbin. Hello? I'm trying to reach Robert. Robert, this message is for you. Listen well and follow my directions to the letter. Drive 3 hours south to the Gurkley Preserve. Leave at 5 a.m., no later. When you arrive there, you will see a few vehicles in the lot, but you will not encounter those morning hikers. A boardwalk heads the trail, boards weathered and beaten by years of the elements. The early morning star shines through the leaves, dappling the path with shifting shadows. Mind your step on leaves slick with dew. After a few minutes, you will find yourself under a canopy of oak, elder, and pine. Their branches groan as a wind blows through, and they may sound like voices. Turn left on the path, where you will pass a stone covered with moss. Take a bit of the moss under your tongue and keep walking. Eventually, you will come to a tree upon which will be carved the following: An exhortation to change by Frater Piotr ex Otstaff. Do you hear it, brothers and sisters? I say, do you hear it, brothers? Do you hear it, sisters? That high-pitched tremble is the sound of an angel's wings a-flappin', a buzz that is the voice of change that is coming. Oh, how the times will be changing on the music of those wings. Sing a song of change and cleansing. For we can't build on the moldering old, no. The old model is so last century, so last millennium. The old order, so rank and decaying, that is not for the Order Templi Diptera. We are vanguard, and we look towards the future. A buzzing future illuminated by our iridescent bodies reflecting off a golden-green sun. The waiting shall soon bloom into a glorious flower of the future that we shall suckle at, drinking deep the delirious delights that await us in the new dawn. Industrious, we acolytes and disciples, we salvage from the wreckage of the past that which can be used to glorify and sanctify our illustrious order. The waiting is the soil, the rot, the excrement. Ah, how my stomach roils hungrily to think of that redolent stench. But what grows from that cultural compost? The petals heavy with scent, transmogrified from the foul to the fecund. The sensual folds and feel under my fingertips, my footfalls, how the stem bends just so, just so. I can hardly stand it, the future so close at hand. I rub my hands together in excited and nervous anticipation, for I have seen it. The vision revealed stunned me to tears of reverie and awe. It will come to pass. For all of us acolytes, disciples, all of our congregation, even those which passed before us, they will return, yes. From their shining alabaster bones we will build an altar. From their putrid flesh a new host consecrated. From death they shall change again into something, if not alive, then certainly not dead. No, death
will have no meaning anymore, for it will just be another signpost on our journey to the future. To change is good. Repeat it, brothers and sisters. Change is good. Glory be. Do not delay, my family, for the hour is nigh. The fat and lazy son of the old ways is inching inexorably towards the horizon. Shadows growing long and hungrier for the new order. Under cover of the night, dark our chapel perilous, we begin to assemble, to gather, to construct a suitable nest to lay our eggs, to cover and protect them, so they will meet the new day ready to hatch, to breathe deep the heavy air, and to work to bring about the change that is past term, and which is ready to burst like a ripe sore. Be jolly in your work, and remember the larvae and the maggots. Mentor them in your work, so that their work may be just as valuable to the cause. And when this work is done, when our new cathedrals and temples to Rex Vola's glory are erected, dawn's light will shine down on our merry coven, and the buzzing will lead us in hymns of thanksgiving and celebration. All hail, hail, Rev Vola, hallelujah, and Nehemat, hail Deptera. We now bring you selections from Iowa, a pamphlet revealing hidden secrets of the state of Iowa. Prehistory of the region and indigenous people. The land colonists named Iowa was populated centuries before their arrival by mainly two tribes, the Yu-Wurl-Hio of the south and the Wampo-Hatatai in the north. Little is written of the Wampo-Hatatai, and it is believed they kept away from Minnesotan tribes in particular. The Yu-Wurl-Hio referenced in the Wampo-Hatatai in some of their folk tales, warning children to beware of the Wampo-Hatatai after nightfall, and their young women of birthing age to check around their dwellings for signs of Wampo-Hatatai lurking. Scholars today believe the Wampo-Hatatai may have been a mere superstition to explain away the deaths that would cycle through the tribe every winter. However, there are compelling etchings which suggest that the Wampo-Hatatai were in fact a tribe of peoples who did exist. They were often depicted as slouched, slovenly, shambling figures dragging away a screaming child or woman, presumably for either slavery or light cannibalism. There are also stories of a giant chasm, the Puit Ju Fukal, located around the current capital of Des Moines, where the Wampo-Hatatai were said to hold strange ceremonies to their elder gods, and where it was whispered a great rapture would occur when the sun becomes green and the sky becomes yellow. Most indigenous tribes had been depopulated in the early 1800s, and only a handful of ancestors survived. Origin of the state. Settlers heading west in the mid-1830s, led by noted charlatan and huckster James T. Polkson, paused their journey in and around the southeastern part of the state after months of travel from points in western New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Mr. Polkson declared that the coterie had arrived at the magnificent Pacific shores in spite of the state being landlocked, and no sign of large bodies of water anywhere save a humble creek. Still, the weary travelers decided to rest their weary bones and tend to the side effects of the syphilis that had run rampant through the camp, originating with the lascivious Mr. Polkson, who, quote, took no care with whom he shared a bed, and had by this time entered the raving end state of his own diseased cocktail of syphilis, chlamydia, and several other sexually transmitted infections lost to time. Of the 44 original party members, only 5 survived the winter. Other gangs of settlers, some fleeing religious persecution, some the long arm of the law, and some exiled for unnatural fornication, eventually populated the various areas of the nascent state. It is notable that settlers in the state mainly stayed in 4 or 5 areas, constituting 3% of the land volume of the state. The remaining 97% is largely barren, and the less said about it, the better. We here enumerate a few of the notable early colonists of Iowa. Susan Bake fled from Massachusetts after being found guilty of witchcraft. She was instead an innovative herbalist and chemist who discovered the curative properties of many kinds of fungi. She was plain and had no husband or children. Charles Old Charlie Friend. After brutally slaughtering his family and setting the house on fire, Old Charlie made a hasty retreat from Virginia and settled near Iowa City. Here he practiced taxidermy and was known to walk the streets wearing the hides of various animals, proclaiming the end times were nigh. Old Charlie met his end under mysterious circumstances involving fire, a spot of grease, and a single blue feather. Thornton Gufferson and the Illinois Seven. Thornton Gufferson was a mystic who led his disciples, the Illinois Seven, to, quote, the Promised Land, end quote, 1 hour south of current-day Des Moines. There, they excavated and settled 10 feet underground, where a pre-industrial society was established that lasted until a collapse buried the entire settlement in the mid-1860s. Vidalia Smirt. The inspiration for the old blues song Pine Box Blues, Vidalia was the first person hung in Iowa for burying her 3-year-old daughter alive. Robert Smelling Frito discovered the lucrative salt deposits that led to the criminal empire that still thrives today. See more in Industrial Revolution and Law and Politics. Strupp Hendren. Legendary lawman, Strupp arrested over 100 criminals in his time as Davenport sheriff. He met an ignominious end after being shot while caught in flagrante delicto with the mayor's daughter and a sheep. War. It was early in the state's history that it was forced to take sides in the Civil War. The governor at the time, Rusty Kingfish, was a shrewd politician and played both sides by sending troops to the Confederate and Union armies. Iowan soldiers would go on to be the fighters with the most kills on either side, the madness in their blood finding sweet release in the murder of their fellow countrymen. Below is one letter from a soldier to his betrothed.
Dearest Abigail, it has been a fortnight since I arrived on the field of battle, and I am awful excited by what I done and seen here. Our group lost 9 today, and Jerry still hangs on by the grace of God, though how he hangs on with no hands I cannot say. It is terrible loud when there is fighting a-going on, cries like the pigs we slaughter on the farm. These boys don't taste nearly as good as those pigs do when they's boiled up with some eggs. Still, we make do as we can, and we lives to fight another day. I miss ye terrible, and at night when it is too quiet, I pretend that you are whispering sweet lullaby to me. I hope Carol is not being too much of a bother without her pa around to keep her under control. I seen some young men in battle who tremble and carry on as she do. I figure maybe them's are touched somewise in the head as she. I woke the last 3 nights as though troubled by the spirit of my aunt, who you recall died most dreadful in the well out back. I woke screaming as she were down there all weak and hungry and thirsting for some water. I don't know, and I don't think it mean nothing. Say a prayer for me at the services and ask the parson for forgiveness for Carol's outbursts, if they be troubling to the other congregants. Perhaps the Lord can move her to a more settled mind. Yours, Percival.
And now, Fiction Corner.
I am hungry. I am oh so hungry.
These are what constitute conscious thought for me and my kind. I came here several cycles ago, born on a meteorite in a hard, small seed. Other, smaller cycles came and went until I hatched from the seed. Upon hatching, I was lifted aloft by currents of air. So small was I that the insect I was ingested by was not even aware of my presence. A brief survey indicated they weren't suitable to sate my hunger, though, so I waited. Then the insect landed on a larger animal, injecting me into their circulatory system. It was warm there, and I was fascinated by the shapes and colors. Eventually, I wound up in a forest alight with electrical activity. I was reminded on a subcellular level of other forests my ancestors had explored, and using this, interpreted the electrical activity to ascertain my next move. So educated about my host, I made my way to a spot just a little bit away from the forest, close enough that I could regularly reconnoiter for pertinent information. And oh, where I have settled is a most fine place, full of several delicious objects. I can feast until sated, leaving in my wake a gray groove, probably not perceptible to the host or those who explore the host looking for, I presume, entities such as myself. But I am not concerned. By my reckoning, it has been several cycles, and no one has been the wiser as to my presence. It was ultimately more instinct than cunning which led me to my current abode, that instinct drawing me to a place not easily discoverable. From the forest I learned that I can expect something on the order of 10 to 15 more cycles before the animal begins to shut down. So I have time, and a lot to eat. There is occasionally harsh light that drives me further into the tissue. Dihydrogen monoxide and its derivatives, along with more solid matter consisting of a variety of minerals, are introduced at more or less regular intervals. There are periods of stillness, and this is where I tend to thrive. I have learned to manipulate the electrical currents in the forest to produce other impulses that serve my secondary needs. This is information that I can load and save to my own subcellular level, to then be utilized by my propagations. I've already budded 3 offspring who have gone on to establish themselves in other quadrants, while I continue to mine my own spot. Knowing I am not eternal, I have no concerns about my appetite not being met, for compared to my size, this region is more than large enough. I find, too, as I continue to consume, that the sustenance is not only longer lasting, but somehow more to my liking. Initially, the material I was eating was sufficient enough for my biological processes to progress, but no more. Now, though, the flavors are stimulating, and I can feel my intelligence growing. I have also learned from the forest that I am very close to something even sweeter, a zone that will initiate several interesting processes in my host. Until then, I continue to eat, to propagate, to rest, and to repeat. The Ghost Summons by Ada Buisson. Wanted, sir, a patient. It was in the early days of my professional career, when patients were scarce and fees scarcer, and though I was in the act of sitting down to my shop, and had promised myself a glass of steaming punch afterwards in honor of the Christmas season, I hurried instantly into my surgery. I entered briskly, but no sooner did I catch sight of the figure standing leaning against the counter than I started back with a strange feeling of horror which for the life of me I could not comprehend. Never shall I forget the ghastliness of that face, the white horror stamped upon every feature, the agony which seemed to sink the very eyes beneath the contracted brow. It was awful to me to behold, accustomed as I was to scenes of terror. "You seek advice," I began, with some hesitation. "No, I am not ill." "You require then—" "Hush!" he interrupted, approaching more nearly and dropping his already low murmur to a mere whisper. "I believe you are not rich. Would you be willing to earn £1,000? £1,000? His words seemed to burn my very ears. "I should be thankful if I could do so honestly," I replied with dignity. "What is the service required of me?" A peculiar look of intense horror passed over the white face before me, but the blue-black lips answered firmly, "To attend a deathbed." £1,000 to attend a deathbed. Where am I to go then? Whose is it? Mine. The voice in which this was said sounded so hollow and distant that involuntarily I shrank back. Yours? What nonsense! You are not a dying man. You are pale, but you appear perfectly healthy. You— Hush, he interrupted. I know all this. You cannot be more convinced of my physical health than I am myself. Yet I know that before the clock tolls the first hour after midnight, I shall be a dead man. But— he shuddered slightly, but stretching out his hand commandingly, motioned me to be silent. I am but too well informed of what I affirm, he said quietly. I have received a mysterious summons from the dead. No mortal aid can avail me. I am as doomed as the wretch on whom the judge has passed sentence. I do not come either to seek your advice or to argue the matter with you, but simply to buy your services. I offer you £1,000 to pass the night in my chamber, and witness the scene which takes place. The sum may appear to you extravagant, but I have no further need to count the cost of any gratification, and the spectacle you will have to witness is no common sight of horror. The words, strange as they were spoken calmly enough, but as the last sentence dropped slowly from his livid lips, an expression of such wild horror again passed over the stranger's face that, in spite of the immense fee, I hesitated to answer. You fear to trust the promise of a dead man. See, hear, and be convinced, he exclaimed eagerly. And at the next instant, on the corner between us, lay a parchment document, and following the indication of that white muscular hand, I read the words, And to Mr. Frederick Keed, of 14 High Street, Alton, I bequeath the sum of £1,000 for certain services rendered to me. I have had that will drawn up within the last 24 hours, and I signed it an hour ago, in the presence of competent witnesses. I am prepared, you see. Now do you accept my offer or not? My answer was to walk across the room and take down my hat, and then lock the door of the surgery communicating with the house. It was a dark, icy cold night, and somehow the courage and determination which the sight of my own name in connection with £1,000 had given me flagged considerably as I found myself hurried along through the silent darkness by a man whose deathbed I was about to attend. He was grimly silent, but as his hand touched mine, in spite of the frost, it felt like a burning coal. On we went, tramp, tramp through the snow, on till even I grew weary, and at length on my appalled ear struck the chimes of a church clock, whilst close at hand I distinguished the snowy hillocks of a churchyard. Heavens, was this awful scene of which I was to be the witness to take place veritably amongst the dead? 11, groaned the doomed man. Gracious God, but 2 hours more, and that ghostly messenger will bring the summons. Come, for mercy's sake, let us hasten. There was but a small road separating us now from a wall which surrounded a large mansion, and along this we hastened until we reached a small door. Passing through this, in a few minutes we were stealthily ascending the private staircase to a splendidly furnished apartment, which left no doubt of the wealth of its owner. All was intensely silent, however, through the house, and about this room in particular there was a stillness that, as I gazed around, struck me as almost ghastly. My companion glanced at the clock on the mantel-shelf, and sank into a large chair by the side of the fire with a shudder. "Only an hour and a half longer," he muttered. "Great heaven, I thought I had more fortitude. This horror unmans me." Then, in a fiercer tone, and clutching my arm, he added, "Ha! You mock me. You think me mad, but wait till you see. Wait till you see." I put my hand on his wrist, for there was now a fever in his sunken eyes which checked the superstitious chill which had been gathering over me, and made me hope that, after all, my first suspicion was correct, and that my patient was but the victim of some fearful hallucination. "Mock you," I answered soothingly. "Far from it. I sympathize intensely with you, and would do much to aid you. You require sleep. Lie down and leave me to watch." He groaned, but rose and began throwing off his clothes, and, watching my opportunity, I slipped a sleeping powder, which I had managed to put in my pocket before leaving the surgery, into the tumbler of claret that stood beside him. The more I saw, the more I felt convinced that it was the nervous system of my patient which required my attention, and it was with sincere satisfaction I saw him drink the wine, and then stretch himself on the luxurious bed. Ha! thought I, as the clock struck 12, and instead of a groan, the deep breathing of the sleeper sounded through the room. You won't receive any summons tonight, and I may make myself comfortable. Noiselessly, therefore, I replenished the fire, poured myself out a large glass of wine, and drawing the curtains so that the firelight should not disturb the sleeper, I put myself in a position to follow his example. How long I slept I know not, but suddenly I aroused with a start, and as ghostly a thrill of horror as ever I remember to have felt in my life. Something, what I know not, seemed near, something nameless but unutterably awful. I gazed around. The fire emitted a faint blue glow, just sufficient to enable me to see that the room was exactly the same as when I fell asleep, but that the long hand of the clock wanted but 5 minutes of the mysterious hour which was to be the death moment of the summoned man. Was there anything in it, then? Any truth in the strange story he had told? The silence was intense. I could not even hear a breath from the bed, and I was about to rise and approach when again that awful horror seized me, and at the same moment my eye fell upon the mirror opposite the door, and I saw— Great heaven, that awful shape! That ghastly mockery of what had been humanity! Was it really a messenger from the buried, quiet dead? It stood there in visible death clothes, but the awful face was ghastly with corruption, and the sunken eyes gleamed forth a green glassy glare which seemed a veritable blast from the infernal fires below. To move or utter a sound in that hideous presence was impossible, and like a statue I sat and saw that horrid shape move slowly towards the bed. What was the awful scene enacted there I know not. I heard nothing, except a low, stifled, agonized groan, and I saw the shadow of that ghastly messenger bending over the bed. Whether it was some dreadful but wordless sentence its breathless lips conveyed as it stood there I know not, but for an instant the shadow of a claw-like hand, from which the third finger was missing, appeared extended over the doomed man's head, and then as the clock struck one clear silvery stroke, it fell, and a wild shriek rang through the room, a death shriek. I am not given to fainting, but I certainly confess that the next 10 minutes of my existence was a cold blank, and even when I did manage to stagger to my feet, I gazed round, vainly endeavoring to understand the chilly horror that still possessed me. Thank God, the room was rid of that awful presence. I saw that. So, gulping down some wine, I lighted a wax taper and staggered towards the bed. Ah, how I prayed that, after all, I might have been dreaming, and that my own excited imagination had but conjured up some hideous memory of the dissecting room. But one glance was sufficient to answer that. No, the summons had indeed been given and answered. I flashed the light over the dead face, swollen, convulsed still with the death agony, but suddenly I shrank back. Even as I gazed, the expression of the face seemed to change. The blackness faded into a deathly whiteness. The convulsed features relaxed, and even as if the victim of that dread apparition still lived, a sad, solemn smile stole over the pale lips. I was intensely horrified, but still I retained sufficient self-consciousness to be struck professionally by such a phenomenon. Surely there was something more than supernatural agency in all this? Again I scrutinized the dead face, and even the throat and chest, but, with the exception of a tiny pimple on one temple beneath a cluster of hair, not a mark appeared. To look at the corpse, one would have believed that this man had indeed died by the visitation of God, peacefully while sleeping. How long I stood there I know not, but time enough to gather my scattered senses, and to reflect that, all things considered, my own position would be very unpleasant if I was found thus unexpectedly in the room of the mysteriously dead man. So, as noiselessly as I could, I made my way out of the house. No one met me on the private staircase. The little door opening into the road was easily unfastened, and thankful indeed was I to feel again the fresh wintry air as I hurried along that road by the churchyard. There was a magnificent funeral soon in that church, and it was said that the young widow of the buried man was inconsolable. And then rumors got abroad of a horrible apparition which had been seen on the night of the death, and it was whispered the young widow was terrified, and insisted upon leaving her splendid mansion. I was too mystified with the whole affair to risk my reputation by saying what I knew, and I should have allowed my share in it to remain forever buried in oblivion. But had I not suddenly heard that the widow, objecting to many of the legacies in the last will of her husband, intended to dispute it on the score of insanity, and then there gradually arose the rumor of his belief in having received a mysterious summons. On this I went to the lawyer and sent a message to the lady that, as the last person who had attended her husband, I undertook to prove his sanity, and I besought her to grant me an interview in which I would relate as strange and horrible a story as ear had ever heard. The same evening I received an invitation to go to the mansion. I was ushered immediately into a splendid room, and there, standing before the fire, was the most dazzling beautiful young creature I had ever seen. She was very small, but exquisitely made. Had it not been for the dignity of her carriage, I should have believed her a mere child. With a stately bow she advanced, but did not speak. "I come on a strange and painful errand," I began, and then I started, for I happened to glance full into her eyes, and from them down to the small right hand grasping the chair. The wedding ring was on that hand. "I conclude you are the Mr. Keed who requested permission to tell me some absurd ghost story, and whom my late husband mentions here." And as she spoke she stretched out her left hand towards something, but what I knew not, for my eyes were fixed on that hand. Horror! White and delicate it might be, but it was shaped like a claw, and the third finger was missing. One sentence was enough after that. "Madam, all I can tell you is that the ghost who summoned your husband was marked by a singular deformity. The third finger of the left hand was missing," I said sternly, and the next instant I had left that beautiful, sinful presence. The will was never disputed. The next morning, too, I received a check for £1,000, and the next news I heard of that widow was that she had herself seen that awful apparition, and had left the mansion immediately.
And now, from Old Wyethscope's Quarterly Concern, dates of import. Save the dates.
September 12th, St. Lanolin's Day. One of the lesser saints, St. Joseph Lanolin, is celebrated this day for the supplicants of his order. Good luck finding any lotion on the shelves of your local apothecary in the weeks leading up to the 12th. Supplicants gather in congregations offering prayers to the saint while liberally slathering themselves with all manner of creams and salves. Slipping and sliding out of their pews, they then march in the streets holding aloft crosses bearing an image of the Messiah, skin unblemished and as soft as an infant's rump. Do not be alarmed by the vision of these adherents, looking for all the world like melting wax figures. Touch them at your own peril. November 4th, Day of. One syllable strikes fear into the hearts of men, women, and children. We must strike the syllable from this broadcast, lest lawsuits proliferate and bankrupt us. This is the desire of the keeper of this symbol, ruin for all creation. An entity so brutally hideous that we dare not call upon it by accident. A small and ever-shrinking collection of insane souls have beset themselves at our doors with pitchforks, torches, and tar, demanding we speak its name, but we shall never. May the tongues be torn from our moldering, bruised heads before we ever reveal the entity for whom this day is reserved. Are they deity? a force of nature, something more than or less than human, we will not and must not reveal that. Your best course for action is to imbibe copious amounts of depressant medications and sleep. Sleep and pray you do not wake to this foul thing's gaze at your window. In your mind, one touch of its rotten appendage and an airy whisper in your ear, driving you with Mach 8 speed to madness and beyond, to realms of pure torture, pain, and suffering unimaginable to rational thought. February 29th, Stockings Day, 1742. A New England tradition since the 1700s, Stockings Day is the day when New Englanders don stockings upon their whole body. Stockings are securely wrapped, tied, or otherwise affixed to a person with not a stitch of other wardrobe. The community then gathers in the town square where the mayor ties all of the other residents together by the loose stockings. A conflagration is started in the center of the mass, and citizens must make haste to undo their bondage and fall upon the mayor, where their limbs are rent violently from their body. The sputtering wounds are then stuffed up with oil-soaked stockings, and the mayor is wheeled to a raised platform for all to behold. The spectacle is awesome to behold, and he or she who retains the mayor's ring by sundown is thus the elected mayor for the next term. February 30th, the day I tried to live. Passing through a veil of blue, I tried to live on the 30th day of February. My love lies cold beside me, unable to be roused. I made my morning ministrations, noting how the shadows stretched across the skies. My shadow was cast white along the ground, sun shining black above. A peculiar thing, my hand had 7 fingers today. I rode the train with several other blank souls. They were trying to live too. In my cubicle I pressed keys, made sounds at the screen, and tried not to think too hard about the occupants of the other cubicles, who were definitely not my co-workers. I caught a flash of movement in the break room, something my mind could not make sense of. My chest hurts when I try to remember it. Mid-afternoon, I collapsed in a fit, left foot all needles and waves of static. The ambulance was too late. The medics could not revive me. Behind closed eyes, I saw the blooming fauna of death surround me like mossy vines, pulsing colors of purple, green, and red. I tried like so many before me to live this day and failed. Now I float in the office, wishing I had roused my love to tell them goodbye. I reach with my hand, now with 5 fingers, to try to breach the membrane between February 30th and every other day to no avail. I am forgotten like the legion that passed before me. My life, a paragraph in a chapter, in a book that sits unread on shelves miles tall, covered in the dust of millennia.
Pachibalak and the Maw of Nichibilak by Michael Cavanero. Subsequent to the establishment of the megacosm, Pachibalak and Nichibilak were deposited upon the shores of the river Mumstar, among the detritus of an ancient battle. When at the appointed time their eyes were caused open, the two peered each unto the other, and recognized a brother. They wriggled upon soft bellies in the coarse sediment until they learnt to devise flagellae. With experience, these became stubby limbs, on which they toddled uneasily until the rudiments of balance were achieved. The brothers in those days communicated exclusively through the broadcasting and exchange of thoughts, until they discerned certain strategic advantages of the tongue. Pachibalak and Nichibilak came upon other rudimentary facts of existence through trial and error. I have discovered, brother, that the troubling sensation of bereft dryness which plagues us may be assuaged by the capture and absorption of this pleasing liquid which streameth past, thought Pachibalak. The savory granules which occasionally washed ashore alleviated a similar but distinct need. When consumed by mouth, they were found to be satisfying, and Nichibilak's voracious appetite for these morsels quickly earned him an insalubrious nickname from his brother.
Nichibilak oft complained of a roaring and clashing noise which vexed him greatly. The distant and staggering workings of the celestial realm were audible to him, but its incessant clamor was jarring. Pochibalak, meanwhile, could detect nothing save the occasional faint hisses of his brother's consternation and the flow of the nearby river. "Hogger, thou'rt imaginative but overdramatic. Have a care for thine own self, and consolidate thy troubles." Day and night elapsed with inconsistent length in those early orbits of the primordial sun. Additionally, Pochibalak found that time's passage or the conscious measurement thereof could be influenced by his mood or fancy. He withheld this in secret from Nichibilak, an initial betrayal. None attended them upon that shore save their wives Krungili and Frucht, whom they held in common. A number of mendicant beings also crossed paths with the brothers. As no city or nation had yet been established in the world, it is speculated that these callers were of infernal or extraplanar origin. Apart from the safety of Mosmdar, there is naught but desolate stone and a precipice of boundless depth. Therefore, to stray from its shores would mean thy doom, spake Hypogean Eriquisk, the far-travelled, smacking his lips and jangling the wrought iron rings which pierced his trunk. "Wherefore then hast thou here arrived, and to what destination art thou next bound?" was the artless yet pointed rejoinder from Pochibalak, perceiving the whiff of deceit. Eriquisk's unnerving snuffling filled the air, but he evaporated before answering, and in his departure he caught a poor unfaithful Frucht with him. Some time later, Pochibalak and Nichibilak received another curious emigrant who dwelt primarily below the waves of the Mosmdar. A fugitive from a shoal of Ouroboros, she taunted the brothers with her dissonant trill and the indecorous display of lobes of fatty tissue. Finally, Nichibilak could bear it no longer, and called out to the Undine with ribald clacks and snappings of his beak. He trembled with such desire that he shed his skin twice over, but in that moment he could not bear the thought of consuming those husks. "How came thee here, sea-daughter? Thou art novel in my sight. Which byway hast thou travelled to attend this dwelling place of my brother and mine?" The Ouroboros arrested her aquatic feats, and answered in shame, "It is said that these waters were forbidden, yet in my despair I intruded. Oh, that I never had so dared, but I was desperate." As if in response, a Tarpeian hunter-emissary of the highest precinct, all sharp angles and obsidian gleam, descended from beyond the clouds and seized the errant Ouroboros, departing immediately to some remote disciplinary estate. Nichibilak had formed webbing upon his hands and feet, but was saved from impulsive action due to Pochibalak's uncanny interference with the progress of time. Thereafter the damage was done. Nichibilak was inconsolable, and his heart was wroth toward his brother. He denied Unaparnaha, a fresh wife, the duties of her ministrations, and the interminable bellow and disquiet of the megacosm further aggrieved him, spurring him to brashness. At dawn, Nichibilak was found absent. Unaparnaha nearly drowned herself in a frantic and jealous search, but Pochibalak accepted this development without qualm. He passed the time in solitude, meditating steadfastly upon the meaning of his sentience, thus earning for himself the title the Blessed. Some months later his reverie was obliterated when half-wit Krungili was heard to exclaim in her inscrutable tongue some crude nonsense indicating a discovery. Krungili extended a grimy fist and opened it. Within was a plump worm with a familiar visage. As at their first meeting, one glance between the brothers was all the confirmation necessary. "Hogger, thou hast returned, and though thou'rt much changed, it seems at least that thine appetite has been somewhat restored," spake Pochibalak in jest. Nichibilak, all unsound and liberated, had shed all pretense of physical complexity. His ungovernable and distended maw consumed the entirety of their store of his favorite river-born grain, then enveloped Unaparnaha and even contemptible Krungili. And when he was still not sated, Nichibilak turned to pursue his brother Pachibalak. With no other option, Pachibalak slowed the passage of time to its current pace. It is within the fraught juncture of this nigh-halted moment that all creatures now live, and also that the legions of the adept themselves gnaw and carve at the world in order to shape it. The entirety of immanence and being lies in the balance. Were either Hogger or his brother to gain the upper hand, all that currently exists would be irrevocably changed, if not diminished. Knowing well this fact, upon the shore of vanished Mosmundar, wretched Nichibilak looms eternally over a prone and defenseless Pachibalak the Blessed.
And now we bring you trivia and facts. Impress your family and friends with these true nuggets of knowledge. From the years 1823 to 1852, Terence Astley served as the secret mayor of London, where he would undo any decrees put into law by the actual mayors of London. He served his nearly 30-year term in the walls of Birminghamshire Hall, sending forth his charges on a team of well-trained rats. Renowned private detective Jake Street, immortalized in the 1943 film Third Chance, held a terrible secret which can now be revealed. Through the diabolical art of necromancy, he came into relationship with an entity he would call Suzanne, that would rise him up from sleep to stalk the streets in a somnambulant daze. Then Suzanne would record the goings-on via Jake's pituitary gland. Jake would awaken the following morning and scribe his morning cup of coffee for insights into the participants. President Gerald Ford's cause of death was not, as officially reported, due to arteriosclerotic cerebrovascular disease and diffuse arteriosclerosis, but complications of pica due to the consumption of copious amounts of pennies. It is said that upon autopsy, the digestive tract of President Ford weighed approximately 70 pounds, of which 60 pounds was pennies, totaling over $100. Ford noted in his memoirs that he was, quote, overfond of the coppery flavor and texture of Mr. Lincoln's fantastic coin, end quote, and would often consume them in the middle of the night to, quote, assuage my strange appetite, end quote. Astronauts on Apollo 14 found evidence that dinosaurs had, in fact, flown to and settled on the moon many hundreds of thousands of years before mankind. Bourbon magnate Elliot G. Paul was afflicted by a malady that left him perpetually famished. He would, in the course of a day, eat upwards of 90,000 calories while maintaining a weight of 145 pounds. His unnatural appetite was handled by a virtual army of cooks, chefs, and sous chefs who worked day and night. It was only upon distilling his signature void gut bourbon that he was able to drink himself into a stupor and give his poor staff a break. Today, void gut bourbon remains a popular potable for, quote, the man who never feels full. When strolling on the boulevard, be alert for crawling things emerging from others' shadows. They are hungry for screams and tears. Used books. Many titles, including Scabrous Musings by Cliff Jesterson, Cruciforms of the Late Roman Empire by Dr. Ted Dropper, A Tropical Horror by Harry P. Logan, The Shining Skull by Yaphet Jop, and The Collected Weird Tales of Samuel G. Vex, and many more. Smell is great. $50 for all. 0938 0900. For rent. 2-bedroom in-law apartment with kitchenette and half bathroom. Conveniently located downtown by all major bus lines. Disregard the smell of copper and bleach and holes in the bathroom wall. Carpet slightly stained. No smoking and pets not welcome. Fit male occupants considered. $600 a month including all utilities. Rent may be reduced if amenable to candid photography. Ask for Eloise, 9053-5525.
And now, wisdom, advice, and prognostication. Sound words to live by. Invest in horse futures and become the glue magnate you dreamed of becoming as a youth.
Run.
The next solar eclipse will be accompanied by a ringing like 1,000 servants' bells tolling, which will indicate the beginning of the age of Zype. Mind that hair under your nails, for it may not be your own. Bowls made of melted pennies make the oatmeal sweeter. When traveling by rail, mind the crawling thing that lurks between the cars. As the lunar phase passes in the 9th millennia of this age, so will the crabs rise up to take their evolutionary prize. The Sabbath screams you hear in the dark are your own. Ravenous spiders with the heads of piranha eat your dreams and weave wire webs in their wake. Turn around and behold your uninvited visitor. Embrace them. Keep your children out of the reptile house, for they are oh so hungry. And now I bid you a restless night.
May you cower in the corner until morning's light. And in the harsh daylight you will see no one really gets out of jail free.
Thank you for listening to the Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour. The Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour was written, produced, edited, and uploaded by Matt Henshaw, except as indicated.